Kia ora mai tātou, ki ngā iwe o te motu, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. G'day everyone, I'm a farmer and I'm one of those people that all this theory is being applied to. This is my story. I'm going to talk to you about how I feel about what's happened in the catchment. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the reality of the trading system, and I will be speaking as a farmer. Part of what I talk about is informed by my role as a trustee of the Lake Taupo Protection Trust. So I'm one of those people that's looking to get the 20% out. I am not speaking as a trustee member, so that's a little caveat that I need to introduce. So what am I going to talk about? Why we supported a nitrogen trading scheme in the first place, how it's worked for us, and then something called Taupo beef. That's our property. Justine showed a photograph earlier showing a couple of farms near the lake edge, an aerial shot. That ironically was our farm, and this is another perspective. You will see a whole range of white pegs in the ground. We've had ag research on our property for the last 5 years, looking to see whether there are viable mitigation options for farmers in the catchment. In other words, can I grow my farm business and still stay within my cap? Those pegs represent over nearly 1,000 underground collectors that were put on 15 hectares of our farm. I know exactly what I leach, as well as having been told it by overseer, and I know that reality is that for me, mitigation is very, very limited. There is no silver bullet. I might get the odd silver buckshot pellet, but that's about all I'm going to get from science. So why did we support the trading scheme? We were pragmatic. We're talking about, when this started, 105 farmers. We formed an incorporated society to negotiate with Justine and her team. And we believe that a market-based instrument would allow us to choose the best and most efficient use of nitrogen discharges. To put it bluntly, we didn't want bureaucrats telling us which farming system we should have. So that was a chance to maintain some control over our operation. But the second one, which is more telling in my view, the price of land in the catchment had tanked over the time of this process, and we felt we needed a fallback option. If we couldn't sell our land, if a farmer got badly hurt and needed to exit the farm, or he wanted to retire, we needed a fallback position such that if the land wasn't saleable, we might be able to sell the nitrogen to someone. And we felt that a market like that would allow voluntary participation in the 20% reduction targets, rather than it be an imposed system. So that's our rationale we went into negotiations with, and I'd have to say I'm glad we chose the option, and basically those things have panned out. Markets always talk about differentials so that you've got some incentive to trade. This is what we as farmers had to accept in the catchment, and these figures are largely endorsed by the Environment Court. Tussock native forest leaches, so the ambient leaching level, if there's no human activity, is 3 kilograms. Plantation forest, in our case, is assessed as 3 as well. Sheep and beef farms, the process of assigning a nitrogen discharge allowance to all farms has shown that the average across sheep and beef farms in the catchment is 17. Dairy farms are 35 kilograms. You'd really struggle to farm in the catchment at 35. The reality is the figure is probably closer to 50. So there are some differentials there, but I'm going to point out later that I don't believe they're that significant to allow the market to operate as perhaps it was planned. So what's happened thus far? A couple of large farming entities are the primary purchasers of nitrogen. And essentially, in the farming context, we're talking dairy farms. There have been no sheep and beef farmers who have purchased nitrogen. There's just not enough margin in sheep and beef farming to allow you to do that. while the price per kilogram of milk solids is high, there's an incentive to purchase nitrogen for dairy farmers. I want to follow on from the point that Bruce made. Land values are now defined by nitrogen discharge allowances in the catchment. The rateable values for farmland in the Taupo catchment is now based on your NDA. Landmass Technology, an organisation in Tauranga that were employed by the District Council to set rateable values, received a ruling from the Solicitor General that, well, put it another way, normally the Ratings Act requires land valuations to be based on land sales. We'd had very few sales in the catchment because no one wanted to buy, so it was very difficult to establish a value. But the Solicitor General ruled that trading in nitrogen credits was a de facto for land sales. So it completely reinforces Bruce's point. You haven't created a new value here, you've just taken the devalued land and replaced it with a value for nitrogen. So every farm in the catchment now has a valuation based on a nitrogen discharge allowance. If that's to be applied to other catchments, raises a huge issue for how you might rate and how you might collect income. The Lake Taupo Protection Trust has purchased to date 128 tonnes of nitrogen. Our target is now 183 tonnes. I would have to say that that target would not have been reached if it hadn't been for the carbon market. And now that the price of carbon is tanked, it's making it very difficult for that to occur. So as a farmer, if you're going to design markets, please do whole systems modelling. I need, as a farmer, whole systems models. I can put in a herd home perhaps and reduce my nitrogen leaching, but will it radically ramp up my carbon footprint? That's the sort of input that I need now as a farmer in order to do what Bruce talked about, which is run my system based on dollars profit per kilograms of emissions. I'm not just going to talk about nitrogen, it's my carbon emissions, my fecal coliforms, my phosphorus, the whole lot. We're having enough trouble struggling with the nitrogen issue in Taupo and getting that right. If you add the complication of all other emissions, it makes the market incredibly complex. I would make the point that in the Taupo experience, a true market will only operate once the Lake Taupo Protection Trust exits the market, having achieved its target or spent all its money. So we can't really tell what the market's going to look like until that happens.